So, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. Would you mind please spelling your first and last name again and pronouncing that for me?
Michael Schechter, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, Schechter, S-C-H-E-C-H-T-E-R.
Thank you very much. What is your official title that you go by now that you're retired?
Well, I use my first name usually for most people, but I'm obviously Professor Emeritus is the official title.
Okay, thank you. How long did you teach at James Madison College?
37 years.
Okay, and it's my understanding you came in 1975?
Right.
Okay.
Fall of 75.
And what year did you retire?
2012.
Okay, thank you. What originally brought you to James Madison?
Well, I think I came because there was this mantra that I was told when I was interviewed by Professors Rubner and Zinman, which was that it was a small college and a large university. I didn't quite believe that, but it sounded like a great concept. I had gone to a large university as an undergraduate, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and saw the advantages of a large university, but it also was extraordinarily impersonal. So the idea of having a place that was both large and had a personal touch was interesting. Plus, the job was in international relations, and that's what I'd focused on in graduate school. And so the idea of being in an international relations place where I teach international relations courses was quite attractive as well.
At the time that you came to James Madison, what what majors did they offer?
At the time, there was international relations, what was then called justice, morality, and constitutional democracy, which became political theory. It was called, I think it was called minority and majority relations, or even ethnic and intergroup relations, but it became what is now social policy. And there was a socioeconomic field, which eventually became political economy, and that eventually was eliminated.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything besides being a small college that differentiated James Madison from other smaller colleges within large universities?
Well, I think because it was a residential setting, Madison College always had a kind of co-curricular set of programs, more so in the old days than more recently. And you really had close relationships with students, and I think because it was a residential college, the faculty didn't live there, but at least in the first years, many of us would be there most of the day and night and on the weekends as well. And so you built very close relations with students who then could follow their careers after they graduated.
How many students were there when you came?
That's an interesting question, because of course the college's problem when I arrived was a relatively low enrollment. So the college probably had, and the real problem was students would come in the fall and then transfer out at the end of the fall semester or the fall quarter because they found the program very challenging. And they had been encouraged to come because they thought it was a small college. It would be a nice transition from high school, but they didn't expect it to be as rigorous as it was. So we probably had maybe 350 to 400 students in the fall, but by the time you got to the spring, you had fewer than 300 students.
Wow.
And so that was the low point, actually. I think spring of 1976, my first year teaching was probably the lowest it got.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same time I arrived, Lou Hirsch arrived as the special assistant to the dean in charge of recruitment. And Lou not only rewrote all the materials, but he actually decided you had to market the college differently. And you had to market as a rigorous program so that students wouldn't come and be shocked and leave. And so the problem that we had disappeared quickly. Not only did enrollment go up, but more importantly, the dropout that we used to see from the fall to the spring changed dramatically because students expected it and they wanted to be challenged, and they saw this as a place to have a serious education. So I think in that sense, Lou was around, I don't know, probably close to 10 years, changed all the materials, went out and met all the high school counselors around the state, but more importantly, he actually changed the whole way in which the college was marketed.
I know today they offer honors options as as an option. But did they work with the Honors College at the time to market it as a more rigorous course? Or?
Well, there were a lot of students who were also in the Honors College. That's the other thing. It's an interesting question. One of the things Lou could do is he was allowed to go out and go along with the MSU admissions people, even though he only spoke for a few minutes. And so he could talk about it in that way. There was a time which the Honors College actually wanted us to put H's next to all of our courses, to list them all as honors classes, and we said no, because the purpose of the college was actually to be open to everyone. And we thought classes were improved by having students who may have had high test scores or good grades in high school in the same room with students who actually blossomed a little bit later. And so we clearly were not excited about the notion of having H's next to all the classes. But we did offer honors options in almost all the classes once they began. The Honors College started out having honors options.
Okay, and so the James Madison was founded in 1967, so you came about 8 years after it started. So were there any difficulties or challenges that the college was facing when you came?
Well, the enrollment, I think, was the real challenge that it had when I arrived. Financially, it didn't have problems because the residential colleges were all set up to have 1,000 students, and so the budgets were assuming that you had a lot of students. And we didn't have a lot of students, so every year the dean would return money back to the university, something that of course doesn't happen anymore, but in those days that was a big change. I think that was the real challenge. Subsequently, we began to hire new faculty when we got more students. Classes in those days were relatively small, but each field was supposed to teach one large class. So I would teach sometimes actually in Wonders Kiva. And Peter Lyman, who was a great teacher but no longer alive, taught in political theory, and he used to teach very large classes too.
Okay. And even though you weren't there in the original first years that James Madison existed, could you talk to me a little bit about what the idea was, or sort of who came up with the idea, who were the leaders, how it came to be?
Yeah, I think that the original idea, and this is all hearsay, came from the first founding dean, Herb Garfinkel, and Dick Zimmern was hired by Herb Garfinkel, so you could talk to him about Garfinkel, who had left by the time I arrived. But there was an attempt, in effect, to be one of the first public universities, which Justin Morrill, which was then doing humanities a couple years earlier, to have residential colleges at a public university. The model had been, in some ways, a place like Yale, which had residential colleges, but this was going to be the first time at a public university. And so the attempt was the university had grown very large in the 60s and suddenly, and so a lot of universities were coping with the question of what do you do with a mega university? And this was the creative idea that came up. So instead of just having a school within the College of Social Science, you had a standalone college. Justin Morrill was like I said, predated us, and so did Lyman Briggs, which was doing natural science.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. So the name James Madison, I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about how they chose James Madison as the person to name the college after.
Again, this is all hearsay, so you could check out with Dick Zimmern, but I think that, the original founders were interested in political philosophy. Herb Garfinkel, some of the original faculty members, prominent faculty members like Jack Painter and Dick Zimmern and Peter Lyman, who kind of built the college, were all interested in political theory and in constitutional democracy. And of course, James Madison fit with that view of constitutional democracy, and I think it was also a useful name because we could kind of get students early on to realize that what they understood as what democracy wasn't quite what James Madison had in mind, and representative democracy is different than pure democracy. And so in a sense it was a very useful way to introduce it with the Federalist Papers, which were always taught in the freshman year, and to get students to think more deeply about the country that they lived in.
And the Federalist Papers are still taught today in
Oh, yes,
the
sir.
freshman classes. Yep, I remember that. could, you've talked about this a little bit, but how would you describe the college's mission in the years that you came to it, and sort of how that mission evolved or changed throughout your career,
I think
or stayed the same?
the mission of the college was always to have close student-faculty interactions, to have a co-curricular aspect to it, to have a rigorous involvement. I think what changed over time was that the faculty, now the original faculty, spent incredible amount of time just building the place, writing the curriculum, and developing the courses and teaching. So many of them had limited scholarship and research that they did in the first years because there was no time for that. I think what changed over the years is that research and scholarship became more important for the faculty. When I first arrived, the faculty were pretty isolated. Over the years, the faculty now, many of them teach courses in other units than they did, and many of the faculty only teach some classes in Madison College. So those are kind of part of the changes. So more, and of course the place got larger. Class size didn't get dramatically different because we were intentionally always emphasizing small classes for the freshmen, small classes for the seniors, and then we'd allow the sophomore and junior classes to get a little bit larger. But the faculty side got much larger. So when I first came, all the faculty could eat lunch in what was the effect of a student's dorm room. And in fact, that's where we'd meet with the dean at lunchtime. That gives you a sense of how small the faculty was. You know, maybe it was a little rotating, but in a sense, we could almost all fit in that room. The faculty knew each other very well. That changed over time. So even though the enrollment got larger, class faculty-student relations stayed about the same. Faculty-student class size stayed about the same. I would also say interactions between faculty and students declined a little bit because faculty were doing a lot more research and scholarship, and they had many more students than they had initially.
Thank you. You talked about what programs it originally offered.
One of the things that changed over time, before I came, when the college was first set up, the major, which is now social relations, which initially was ethnic and intergroup relations, in the 60s was the biggest major.
1 second, excuse me. I'm gonna stop this for